Council of Churches has called for a national dialogue on foreign nationals working in South Africa. And this comes in the wake of new calls by some members of society who are calling for the removal of illegal foreign nationals from South Africa with immediate effect. Now, the South African Council of Churches says that problems relating to foreign nationals have a direct impact on communities and it urgently needs a multinational stakeholder solution. Dr. Siphamandla Zondi is an affiliate in the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation and Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg, and he joins us now for a further discussion. Professor Zondi, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, and good morning to the listeners and the viewers as well.
Prof, let's start with this problem that we seem to have. Let's call it a challenge, because South Africa has been grappling with this issue for quite some time, and we've seen in the past issues where people have lost their lives through xenophobic attacks. So how would you characterize the problem as it stands right now in South Africa?
I think it is first, it's a global problem. The problem about how to deal with the failing states that lead to people leaving their countries in droves to countries that may be relatively stable next to them. It's a global problem. Therefore, you have to think of global solutions as well. It's a regional problem in our case as well, which places a lot of blame on SADC, for example, and what it was able to do and not able to do to resolve mainly the situation around Zimbabwe, around Lesotho, around a number of other countries and all of that. It's an economic problem because people move to where they can find some jobs, where they can make a means, where they can do some entrepreneurial work. That is what has been happening for us. Then there are particular things related to how South Africa manages migration. Migration must be managed so that it contributes to development, it contributes to human rights and all of those kind of things. But it seems that we have really struggled in a big way to manage migration and to manage how it is done. For as long as the borders are required by the international legal system, you need to keep them working efficiently. We do not quite do that. And that creates all manner of problems because the economic migrants that come in, they put pressure on those who are already settled in South Africa for scarce opportunities, and that generates tension. It's predictable.
So why does South Africa seem to be hamstrung in dealing with this problem in any effective sort of way, Professor?
I think ours is a general problem related to how we also manage education or manage health or manage provision of water and all that. Inefficiencies within the governance system that limits our ability to even implement what we have as acts, as laws, as policies. The second one, it seems to me, is a bit of a confusion about what does it mean for us to be Pan-Africanist and all of that. Whether that means you allow illegality of any form, just as illegality in the form of someone stealing or stealing from someone or illegally occupying a property or stuff like that. The illegality of coming in and not going to secure the papers is a form of illegality. So it's illegality right through, and our inability to deal with illegality is a problem. You have to distinguish the problem of refugees who are political refugees from persecution. There are processes that are legal for handling that. That is not quite happening efficiently. And then we have economic refugees, which are people simply escaping poverty and stuff like that. There are also legal ways for them to settle in and end their living. But illegality is allowed, and that then also brings in all other forms of illegality, including crime and and so on. It's a problem that our state is really battling to handle according to the laws, according to international law, and according to international human rights provision that provide for how you manage this, and that allows a terrible situation that we see now.
Just going back to two touch points that you've highlighted there in your responses, Prof. Firstly, the issue of how South Africa actually manages or mismanages the situation at this point. We look at what's been happening over the past few weeks, not even to go too far back. So last week we saw the EFF, through their leader Julius Malema and others, going to restaurants to check on the ratio of South Africans versus foreign workers at these establishments. The previous week, we saw a similar sort of action by the Patriotic Alliance in Eldorado Park here in Johannesburg, whereby they went to foreign-owned shops, also conducting some sort of inspection. Now, one has to ask, how is this going to play out eventually, and where does it stop? Because what then prevents other South Africans tomorrow from doing similar things, where people just mobilize and decide they will now be the ones conducting inspections on who knows what? So the management of that issue, one, and two, the question of Pan-Africanism, which you touched on. And to quote the ANC from their Lekgotla this weekend, the president in giving a briefing said, the ANC will need to lead the debate on immigration in order to ensure that it remains infused with principles of Pan-Africanism and is not overtaken by right-wing sentiments, which raises again that question that I've posed to you: where does it stop? How do we actually go about managing this problem as a country?
Two things there, Sakina. One is that when the state fails to discharge a particular area of public policy, it gives room for others to take over that role, which really belongs to the state to do. But when the state doesn't seem to be moving and doing it, then others step in because of the pressures that are coming from constituencies. In this particular case, the Department of Labor and Employment is supposed to know where there might be violation of laws by the rights by the employers, sometimes almost completely replacing locals with immigrants in job opportunities that arise out of national taxes and all that, which is wrong. And the employers are doing it because it is easier to exploit the immigrant. So it's a double problem there. One is the one of exploitation, super exploitation of immigrant workers. But the second one is the one where you don't follow the laws for the employment and almost completely displace the locals. It just doesn't work. It's not allowed anywhere in the world. And when the state fails to do those inspections and only does inspections after the PA and EFF has done it, and then Department of Labor announced they're going to go to the Western Cape hospitality industry. They've been alerted about the problems of how employers are handling this thing, and they should have long used the laws, long the power to inspect, the power to enforce laws long ago, but they have not done it, and the state reacts. Our state sometimes follows what others outside the state do. And that's the problem. The second one relating to Pan-Africanism. When the government says it's warning about these right-wing tendencies or what might be right-wing tendencies that might emerge, sometimes mischaracterizing them, and it wants to make sure that the policies stay within Pan-Africanism, they are suggesting that the approach that is happening is Pan-African. There's nothing Pan-African about chaos. There's nothing Pan-African about uncontrolled integration of migrants. There's nothing Pan-African about illegality. There's nothing Pan-African about failure to protect even the immigrants from exploitation in it. So I think it's just narrative that are being used that do not quite help resolve the situation. You have to get a handle on it, and this national dialogue might actually help get everybody together to say, how do you have a united approach to this thing to deal with both the issues of receiving the migrants here, but also the issues of dealing with the push factors in the countries where they come, because there are certain responsibilities about certain countries making sure that they also do their part so that they don't pass the buck to other states for the failures that they encounter.
And perhaps just a final point, Prof, also reading from that statement from the Lekgotla there, promoting legal migration is a central aspect of securing peace and security of South Africa and the sub-region, and the ANC must act against the stoking of anti-African statements, close quote on that one. So the South African Council of Churches also says that the country is, of course, faced with the challenge of addressing a persistent South African attitude, but an attitude specifically towards African migrants. So how do we deal with that in a meaningful way when, as you've just pointed out, the state is failing at various levels, on various occasions, because we remember what happened when President Ramaphosa met with the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari a few years ago. We were told they would look at solutions, but what has come of all of that?
You're right. We haven't seen those solutions. We haven't seen anything new being done to manage migration. Nigeria itself manages a migration, and it manages very carefully. And when things were hard, it closed the border recently with Benin. It's an issue that's about to manage. What I think we need to really think very carefully about is, indeed, in that statement that you quoted, manage migration legally, or it will happen illegally. When it happens illegally, it becomes a law and order issue, unfortunately. But you have to manage it legally, make it possible for people to come into South Africa and find jobs. Let them be documented. Let them be known where they stay. Let them be assisted. Let them find assistance when they're super exploited. Because that's how human trafficking also happens. If you don't manage migration legally, you are then actually opening yourself up to illegally. There is no gain in contrasting this failure to manage it with a small component of anti-African burden. There are people who are concerned with migration generally, that it is uncontrolled. That is not anti-African. It is anti-illegal immigration. It's anti-poor management of migration. And I think our leaders must be careful not to contrast what does not and create a sense as if you should not ensure that law migration is done properly, because if you talk about it, you are then xenophobic or other. We overuse this term, but sometimes we use it for self-interest. It is not xenophobic for people to ask that migration must be managed and be managed according to the law. And the implications of it must also be managed, because if you don't, you will lead to a situation where xenophobic violence would then actually happen, and then you will have to manage a crisis later on. Let's prevent a crisis from happening by managing migration. And that is what we hope that the government, led by the Minister of Home Affairs and working with other social partners, would find lasting solutions to the migration issue.
Well said, Professor Zondi. Couldn't agree more with that sentiment. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Dr. Siphamandla Zondi, an affiliate in the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation and Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg, and giving his shot at possible solutions with regard to foreign nationals in South Africa and, of course, the difficult predicament that the country finds itself in, with some right-wing sentiments rising against foreign nationals in the country. With that, it's time for the latest news. Leanne standing by with that.